Good morning, New Delhi. I'm very happy to be with you this early morning in Europe, 7:30 in the morning. I'm very happy as well for the members of the panel, the two professionals that are in this panel, that are great professionals that I personally know and I appreciate in personal terms. No? We are going, we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to go very fast, but many things are going to be left aside. But if you want to follow up, I will be very happy to follow up. And this video is going to be YouTube. So if you think you have missed anything, you can go back and watch it in YouTube. I'm going to share the screen for these 20 minutes comments. Well, we are going to talk about India metropolitan resilience, no? Which are extremely important for the future of India, the capacity of the metropolis to respond to the needs of Indian's economy, Indian sociology, Indian governance, and so on. No? The beginning of the talk is things that you already know. Maybe I will point a few elements that are new. No, you know this graph. The gray side part of that graph is a United Nations graph with the change we are experiencing in the world right now from rural to urban. No? And every day 300,000 people are moving from rural to urban. In India, it's 50,000 people every day, which means that you build a metropolis every week and a half, 2 million people in a few weeks. And the issue, what is new in this graph is that this has an asymptote. This growth is not forever. It's for, it has been going on for the last 70 years since Second World War, which has been the boom of urban development and metropolises, and it will grow until we reach 11 billion people in cities. 11 billion people all around the world, and that will mean 7.5 billion people in cities. This is going to go for the next 50, 60 years, but what we have is to plan for those figures. We cannot just let metropolis grow in an unsustainable way as we are doing right now. And we have to plan for that future, but it's not an exploding future. It has an asymptote, and those figures are the ones that we have to plan ahead. And many cities in the 19th century were planned for 100 years ahead of us. And we are not doing right now that. So we have to plan with a long-term vision and not just for 8, 12 years, which is not enough. At this moment, in cities over 1 million inhabitants, metropolises over 1 million inhabitants, 24.5% of humankind lives there. That's again figures from the United Nations. And in the history, that's absolutely new. In the history of the world, there were only 3 cities that 3 metropolises that had more than 1 million inhabitants or 700,000 inhabitants. That was Rome, that was Beijing, that was London. Why not India? Because as you see, those 3 metropolises were big empires, and India was a set of different kingdoms within the Indian context. So the concentration of people is due to those empires historically, and that's why those were the 3 metropolis that had. Anyway, that's historical background. From 3 cities, metropolises of over 700,000 people, we have moved to 500. From 3 to 500 in 70 years. So it's really the explosion. And as you see, in India, there are a lot. We will look back to that. No? And those 500 metropolises, which are 25% of humankind, they produce 75% of the world GDP. So 25% of people produce 75% of the GDP. That means that these people, the metropolitan people, are 16 times more efficient in terms of GDP than the rural people. So that's why the world is run by metropolises. The globalization is through metropolises, And if the metropolises of a country do not work, that country does not exist in global terms. So really, it is a must that the Indian metropolis perform, and that's the way India will be the world power it deserves and the position in the world. If you see the production of metropolises, the GDP of metropolis interlink related to the GDP of countries. The red ones are metropolises and the black ones are countries, and you put them in rank. Already out of the 100 territorial units in the world more productive, 46, 45 are metropolises. And if you go to the next 100 group rank, you will see that almost all metropolises. So metropolises are as powerful and as productive as countries. And let me say, Mega York, megapolis of New York, from Washington to Boston, if it was a country, it would be the third country of the world after the United States and China. And the United States will not lose his first rank. So really, metropolises are the power sources, the engines of the world. And if you see, India is there in number 9, but Mumbai and New Delhi are number 76 and 90. And that's not, that means that India metropolises are not working good enough. You should have, in that group, you should have at least 6 metropolises, and there are only 2. So really, Indian metropolises are not working as they should, and that is the purpose of this mechanism, of this presentation. You have, in this group of 500, you have, I remember it was something like 51 metropolises with 1.5 million plus. No? I am just talking of memory, and I might make small mistakes, but the concept is that you already have 10% of the metropolis of the world are Indian, 10%. And out of this, as my previous point, out of those metropolis, at least 6 of them, the big 6 ones, should be among the 100 metropolis of the world. This is the, to the right, this is the graph of the pattern of metropolitan India. You see every yellow square is 1 million inhabitants. And you have there a very strong structure that has to be articulated between the metropolis. We are not going to talk about the Indian context. We are going to talk about the metropolitan context of each of them. And the map to the left is a map that I love, because it shows how in history those metropolises have come about, no? And you have metropolises that were already metropolis 600 BC, and then metropolis, how historically they have been built over, and the reasons for that historical evolution. But we are not going to go into that. We're going to focus on how to manage metropolises and to give you some ideas about Indian metropolises, to make them resilient and then to be well. The difference between cities and metropolises is that a city is monocentric. A city has a big center, that's why it's a city, and it develops around in kind of onion rings. And the metropolis, no. A metropolis is we will see the definition later, is a set of urban units that share a significant daily commuting. So cities are monocentric, metropolis have to be polycentric. And that's the power of metropolis. If you try to build a metropolis which will be monocentric, that will not work, it will not perform, and that's one of the problems of Indian metropolis. So the very, very big difference is between, for cities, concentric, monocentric, conurbated, and so on, the environment is outside the city, is around the city, is pushed away every time the city grows. The environment is not part of the city. The environment is outside, it's external to the city, not in the metropolis. In the metropolis, the environment is part of it, is interstitial to the different municipalities, to the different centers, the polycentrism, and the environment is part of the metropolis, is not pushed aside, is not pushed away from the metropolis. So that's why metropolises are much more resilient if you know how to manage them. If you don't, it's a mess. If you know how to manage them, metropolises are much more resilient, much more natural. The environment is part of the metropolis, is not a way. But metropolis, and I mentioned just now that if you know how to manage them, they have to be managed in a completely different way from cities. And the problem is that we are trying to manage metropolis as we were managing cities, and that doesn't work. For example, a city, you have a government structure, you have the mayor, you have the deputy mayors, you have the chief of departments, you have the services, and then you have the population in an orbital system, the mayor in the center or the mayor at the top of the pyramid, and then the structure of power. And in a metropolis, it's not at all like that. You don't have a mayor of a metropolis. You have many mayors. You have the different secretaries of the state that deal with transport, with environment, with economy, with public administration, and so on. And you have as well the agencies of water, of transport that are there. And in a democracy, or even in a non-democratic world, each of those have a different competences, and each of those cannot be told what to do by another institution that is not on top of them, related to them. No? So instead of having the structure of power, the pyramidal structure of power, we have a matricial system, which each of those institutions have to talk to each other and making agreements, and those agreements are going to affect third parties, and those third parties have to know about those agreements to react and to adapt, and so on and so on. So it's a completely different way of discussion of building a metropolis. And the problem is that we are trying to think of a metropolis as a city, and a city, as you see, works differently. In a city, you must have a top-down, bottom-up dialogue. The mayor has to listen to the population. That's the participation on the process of governance on a city. In a metropolis, it's a peer dialogue between all these institutions that have to make decisions within the metropolis. And the participation of the people is a participation within those institutions, depending if they are elected, appointed, the way they are elected, and so on, or the way they are appointed. And so the participation is secondary because it's through the different institutions, and within the metropolis is a peer dialogue. It's a completely different way of making decisions on how to run the metropolis. And the way of planning it is as well completely different. In a city, you have to have a regulatory plan, because in a city, the planning means what the private can do or cannot do with his land. So it's a relationship between the administration and the private, where the administration tells the private what he can do and who cannot do, and then you have a public inquiry, and then you protest, but at the end the plan is approved and then is implemented. And in a metropolis, not at all, because you are not going to make a plan with 180 institutions that have to approve it. You will never approve it. In a metropolis is a strategic and structural plans. First, the plans that have to look at economy and sociology, governance and physical, and then structural, how to organize the physical structure of the metropolis. But it's not a plan which is approved. It is a plan that is a rolling plan that has to be the results of the agreements and the discussions of all these institutions within a framework of collective intelligence, to know where you are going and to know how to make all those decisions consistent and productive. This kind of approach, this is from the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, similar to the World Bank, but for Latin America. And as you see, they have accepted this difference as a rule of working together. Let me say just for a moment, I mentioned mega New York, from Washington to Boston. Let me just say for a moment that if metropolises are what they are, this kind of, as I mentioned, the set of urban units that share a significant daily commuting, megapolises, and I would rather use the word megapolis than megalopolis, no? Because the shorter, the more elegant it is, and we don't need to make longer words. Megapolis. Megapolises are constellations of metropolises. Metropolis are that set of urban units, and then when you have this kind of mega York with Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Newark, Baltimore, Washington, and so on, each of them in itself is a metropolis, and so you have really constellations of metropolis, and those are megapolis. And obviously, India will have New Delhi in 2050 is going to be the larger metropolis, megapolis in the world with 42 million people. And so it's part of the Indian prospects, how to run those megapolis. Those megapolis as being constellations of metropolises, they have a different way of being organized. They have a slightly different. They are more confederations of metropolises than really have a federal or unitary system. We don't have time to look at all that, but I'm going to make some mentions at the end. The confederal system does not work for metropolises. Metropolises have to be either in a federal system of devolution of power to the metropolis, or in a unitary system of decentralized power that is a delegate, like in France, the préfet and so on, a delegate that runs the metropolis on behalf of the unitary system. But we don't have, I am afraid we don't have time to discuss these issues. We saw before that this is the structure of metropolises in India, and really India's stake, the position of India in the world in a few years' time, really is jeopardized by the lack of efficiency right now of Indian metropolises. Metropolis have to be something on the range of 30–40% more efficient than the rest of the country. That's how it works in more developed countries. And in India, the metropolises are as efficient as the rest of the country, and that's not the way. So we really must concentrate on making those Indian metropolis work. This is a graph from UN Habitat. There is the definition of metropolis as a set of urban units that share daily significant commuting. And as you see, metropolises are not the urban settlement, are not the urban agglomerations, are not the city administration. Metropolises are something different that have not an administrative structure yet, not even in India. You see to the right, that's New Delhi, to the left is London. No? And as you see, the red dotted lines of what UN Habitat calls the metropolis of New Delhi has nothing to do either with the urban settlements and so on. It's a complex thing that has to be defined in other terms, and I'm afraid we don't have time for that. So New Delhi has a set of already beginning metropolises around, like Rohtak, like Kapur, like Bulandswar. Sorry, I am very bad at Indian names. Huh? And as you see, New Delhi has a very strong structure, the linear structure of the rivers, picture rivers in parallel, and the location of the other cities around the metropolis, megapolis of New Delhi are set up related to that strong line of the river and the perpendicular lines, which are the gradients to the distance to the rivers. And if you think that New Delhi is just a monocentric metropolis, then you will do a peripheral expressway that will be around a ring road around New Delhi. But that's a wrong approach, because if you do then start to do ring roads around the other big cities around New Delhi, or Rohtak, Meerut, Jhajjar, Hapur, Rewa, or Khurja, what would you end up is doing a new ring roads after that, and you will end up with this kind of vision of the megapolis in the future, and that doesn't work. That obviously is a crazy idea of making ring roads and ring roads and ring roads until you fill up all the environment. No, New Delhi is different. New Delhi has a very strong directionalities, and you have to work out about those directionalities. I did present that a few years ago to the minister and to the Secretary General of the minister. They were very much interested, but obviously they have many urgent things to address, and they could not follow up in that kind of approach to the running of those megapolis in India and so on. And then other instances of the administration, lower ones, do not have the vision of the whole system. They are located in their more small competences to address them, and they have not the capacity to see the whole picture. So it is difficult to understand. I've been in politics for 16 years, and in politics, the urgent generally goes ahead of the important. And as a politician, you must realize what is important and always save time and effort for the important, and not being run over by the urgent. So Delhi, I'm going to jump a few slides. Delhi is not a round thing, so it does not need a ring road. Delhi is a linear reticular structure with the rivers, with the perpendicular of the rivers and so on. So that vision of Delhi is to require. And when you understand that, immediately you have there the 7, 8 important projects that will structure Delhi as a megapolis, and that will put Delhi ahead of many other megapolis around the world. We did that a few years ago in a brain shop with the ministry, and I will mention that at the end of this set of Indian slides, Indian metropolis. All of this is the result of brain shops, which are the development of collective intelligence. All these institutions that are related to the metropolises decision making have to get together and have that vision of the future, which is necessary to make consistent that policy about the metropolis, and that is called brain shops. And we have done many of those with the central government, the federal government of India, and the European Union. And the results I'm going to present is just about that. And also, you see, you have a set of projects that are obvious that have to be developed, and they will be developed, but it will take time if there is not the grabbing, the empowerment of the local authorities to develop those projects. In Mumbai, Mumbai in 1947 jumped the bay and created Navi Mumbai. So it's time now to jump again, leap forward to develop the next phase. And as a matter of fact, in the Mumbai new plan, that vision has been integrated due to the workshops we did 4 or 5 years ago. No? And obviously, immediately 4 or 5 great projects come about, obvious to be developed in Mumbai. I am not going to go through those projects. I am not even going to go through all the metropolises that we have been working on and have that setting already prepared, which is Pune, which is Chennai, which is Bhubaneswar, which is Kochi, which is Ahmedabad, which is Surat, and which is Chandigarh. No? We have no time to discuss each of them, but I am open to any further. You can ask for the results of those brain shops, Metropolitan workshops to the European Union. They are official, so they have them in their files. And if they don't find them or they don't respond to you, I will be happy to share that with you. These projects, these visions have been developed not by technical guys, have been developed by the people with responsibilities within these metropolises that got together for a week, and they were able to together develop a vision of what should be that metropolis in the future. In the case of Mumbai, these brain shops have 3 phases. First is, what do you want to be in the future? What are your possibilities? What do you want? Second phase, what do you have to do to become what you want to be? And third phase, all the projects that requires to be done to be able to become that. No, and it is the metropolis that produce that in social terms and not just in technical terms. And that's the empowerment of metropolis of the future. And in the case of Mumbai, it was very clear. What does Mumbai want to be in the future? Mumbai wants to be the capital of the Indian Ocean. So from Cape Town to Ho Chi Minh City, Mumbai has to be the head, the most important metropolis capital that will in some way work within that framework for the benefit of Mumbai, or for the benefit of India, as well as for the benefit of all the other metropolis around the Indian Ocean, that will benefit of an organization that will work. No? Anyway, as I mentioned, we have no time for that. This is the most important slide of them all, and we have no time to go into the discussion of all the details, but these are the points that we have to realize. We must, for a metropolis, we must first, to make it resilient, the requirement is you have to have a resilient pattern of growth. You must know where you have to put the green infrastructure, the gray infrastructure, the housing, and so on, with a vision of the future, and avoid the do nothing business as usual growth that is making these huge conurbations impossible to manage. You have to have a resilient pattern of development. That means that you have to know where you are going. What do you want to be? Mumbai wants to be the capital of the Indian Ocean. And then have a strategic global positioning role. That means that you must not think about the metropolis and providing water and providing public transport services just on that. You have to think about what is your role in the world? What is your role within those 500 metropolis of the world, which are the globalization? And if you are out of those 500, you're out. You are really marginal, and you will be subservient to another metropolis that will be well positioned. So you have to know what is your role. I remember I sometimes mention that sentence from John F. Kennedy that said, "Do not think what America can do for you, think what you can do for America." No? So metropolis is, do not think what the world can do for you, think what you can do for the world. And then you'll be positioned in that globalization. And that's the resilient pattern of development. Madrid, for instance, decided to be the hub between Europe and Latin America, and it's becoming. We moved from 9 million passengers in the airport of Madrid to 61 million, and that's the position of Madrid for the next century or century and a half of 2 centuries. And that's what you have to have as a vision. You have to have a resilient pattern of finance. You cannot do that without money. The private sector to work needs goods produced by the public sector on indivisible goods. The divisible goods are easy to finance because you can charge whoever uses them, but there are indivisible goods that require to be provided by the public sector. And if the public sector does not have the share of the GDP required to do those public goods, the metropolis and the country will not develop. And those figures are for the whole public sector in the range of 40%. That's what the developed countries have. And that 40% have to be shared among the local authorities and the metropolis, which is in the range of 13%, and then the national budget 27%. And India is far from that. And that's the range of the developed countries of North America and Latin America and Europe and so on. So we have no time to discuss all this, but you can find information in my webpage. And then a resilient pattern of governance. I mentioned before, the megapolises are confederate, but the metropolis cannot be confederate. It's not the setting of mayors that can solve the problems of our metropolis. It has to have a consistent government, which is either devolve, that means that the metropolis has a government of its own, and that might work in federal countries. For instance, in Germany, Berlin, Hamburg, and Bremen are metropolises, and they have their own government to govern the metropolis. In India, probably that doesn't work, but then it's a devolution, a delegation system, which is central government creates a delegation to run the metropolis, which is the case of in France, the préfet, and in other places as well. No, in Kampala, the minister of Kampala, and so on. No? And which doesn't work is either the centralized system, where everything is decided by the ministries in the central government, or the confederate system that doesn't work. All what I have been saying to you is fine. The only problem is that I think in Western frame of mind, and in Western terms, in philosophy, Western philosophy, we have either Plato, which is the concept and then is applied to the reality, and the other guy is Aristotle, which is reality, which is analyzed and then worked in concepts brought out of that reality. Metropolitan discipline is Aristotelic, is a discipline of practice. is an imperfect theory and so on, is a part of the empiricisms and so on. And that's why I'm very happy to be in this panel with the two other professionals of practice that know how this works. But it has to go, this discipline of practice that has to be built from real practice and professionals have to grow into the university, because the university has to form and to teach the new generation on how to run those metropolises if we want to have those metropolises. So my problem is that I am Western and I have had a Westernized approach to this issue, but Western is only one of the three big cultures of the world. The Chinese with Confucius and Lao Tse, India with Krishna and Buddha, and Europe, Western civilization with Aristotle and Plato. And the problem here is that the Chinese and the Westerns are completely apart in philosophical terms. The Westerners think that the individual is the important element of society, and you have to protect and to enhance the individual because he's the one that changes society. And the Eastern approach is that the importance is society, and the individual is just a member of that society to be framed within that society. And in that kind of confrontation that what we are seeing in the last years, and we will see further going down the road in the next century or so, India is in the middle. So we need either both the Westerners and the Easterners. We need India to play a balanced role between those two cultures as the third and the central culture that will be able to understand how to share that proportion balance between the individual and the group. And I think it's not just India that needs to have the metropolis working well, it's the world that needs India to have the metropolis working well. So we need the Indian metropolitan resilience to balance the world. Thank you very much.